Today we have Roland Lawrence with us to talk about solar and how I might be able to go off-grid at the impossible house. So thanks very much, Roland, for joining us. One of the things that's a huge issue for me is putting solar panels on the front roof. And I've noticed that there's a bit of a difference between the councils. So could you explain how that works to me?
The main issue is your house is in a heritage conservation area. So to be an exempt development, i.e. not requiring any approval from council, you can't put any solar panels on the street frontage. However, Sydney City Council is allowing panels on the street frontage, provided they adhere to a reasonably strict guideline. So there's no actual reason why you can't put them on in the Inner West, other than the Inner West Council just saying no.
So I'm not going to be putting solar panels on the front roof as part of the first part of the build. What do I need to do next?
The restriction about having solar panels on the front of the house is around being an exempt development. So you can, of course, put in and apply for a full DA. I've found through some other customers of ours in the Inner West that the Inner West Council was just rubber stamping a no on that, even though the facility and the legislation and the state environmental planning policy does allow for it.
Okay, that's really interesting. And it's a non-permanent structure as well. So really, in the future I can remove it.
That's exactly right. And that's perhaps one of the more interesting points of this whole argument. Solar panels only last 20 to 30 years, whereas the heritage consideration of your neighbourhood is measured in over 100 years. So given that solar panels can be installed in a non-destructive way, that is not interfering with the fabric of the heritage building, there really is no reason why they couldn't allow it, given that some nice design guidelines were adhered to, like in the City of Sydney.
Yeah, so I'm definitely all for heritage, but if my house burns down due to climate change, then there's probably not that much heritage left. Fingers crossed they let me do it in the future. So, Roland, I'm trying to go off-grid in the impossible house. What kind of system will I need to install so that I can go off-grid?
Our design, if we can use the front of the house, will give you a 7.2 kilowatt solar array and 18 kilowatt hours worth of battery storage. We've done a reasonably in-depth energy audit to ensure that this is enough both in summer and winter, and that this is the number that we've come up with.
So one of the things that I've found on my journey for the impossible house is every time I suggest that I want to disconnect from the grid, so disconnect from the mains, have an incinerating toilet, want to disconnect in terms of electricity so I'm completely self-sufficient. Are you like everyone else that's going to tell me that I shouldn't do that?
I'm not going to tell you what to do, but I am going to warn you of the dangers. It can be quite handy to leave the grid connected so you can have it as a contingency for that period in winter where we've had 3 days of rain. You've had a couple of big parties in a row as well, and you've completely exhausted the capacity of your battery bank. The grid will provide you that flexibility. So you could be 99.9% off grid, except for that one occasion. To get that level of contingency in an off grid scenario, we'll need to drastically increase the size of your battery bank to build that contingency into your own system rather than having the external grid available.
Yeah, and one of the things I think that I'll probably have to do over time is experiment a little bit. So I probably should stay plugged in until I'm certain that I wouldn't be using as much electricity that would require me to draw from the grid as well. So yeah, maybe a little bit of a safety net at first, and then I'll rip the band-aid off and see what happens, I guess.
Absolutely. And you've just outlined the importance of having a really good monitoring system with your solar system, which provides you the data on both your production and your consumption, and in this case, your battery capacity as well. Without that, you're just running your system blind.
What kind of questions do you have to ask them to figure out what they need?
So in an off-grid scenario, this becomes absolutely vital because there's only a finite amount of energy in those batteries. At the start of this project, we sat down and we went through a full energy audit, which listed all of your appliances from cooking, heating, all the way through to mobile phone chargers and electric toothbrush chargers. We then applied a duty cycle to them, which is how often per day do you use them? And from that, I can build a very detailed sort of energy profile and then size the system appropriate to that.
Yeah, and one of the, I guess, big unknowns for me is that I have an incinerating toilet, so I don't have a flush toilet, and that's going to chew up a lot of electricity. So this probably speaks to your point that I should stay connected until I figure out if, going to the toilet is meaning that I'm going to run out of electricity.
Personal usage habits are very unique to the residents. We've got customers that have very similar appliances and number of members in the household, but use wildly different amounts of electricity. So it really needs to be done in depth and as accurate as possible. Having the grid there does provide you that flexibility to make sure we do get it right. If you can, we can leave the grid connected for an entire year, and that gives you good seasonal data between summer usage and winter usage as well.
So, how important are energy efficient appliances? Is that, more important than you turning the lights off?
Well, lights these days are very energy efficient with the prevalence of LED globes. Energy efficient appliances are extremely important in this conversation, but personal usage habits are far more important when it comes to exactly how much energy you're going to use.
Okay, so that probably brings us to the next question. When should you be using your appliances? How do you maximize your solar system?
Using as much power as you can in the middle hours of the day is obviously the most efficient way to use your appliances, but there's only a specific number of appliances or usage habits that you can change. Dinner's always going to be at dinner time. The hottest part of the day is always going to be the afternoon. So being aware of your usage is the most important thing in operating a solar power system, because things like your dishwasher, your washing machine, and even your aircon, if you turn your aircon on earlier in the day and not let your house heat up, then you're going to be running it miles more efficiently during that solar period where you've got access to the free power.
And for me, is one of the reasons why I should be using electricity during the day is because when I use electricity from the battery, there's a small amount of energy that gets lost when you convert from sun's rays into storage in the battery. Is that correct?
Yes and no. There is always round trip efficiencies, but because your solar system produces more in summer than it does in winter, and we have to size it around your winter consumption as well, that means that in summer you've got a surplus of energy. Without having the grid connected, that electricity just gets turned off and wasted. So the more you use in the day, the less load you're putting on your batteries of a night time.
What exactly is the duty cycle?
So duty cycle is how often you use your appliances. You might do a load of washing every single day, or you might do a load of washing once a week. All of that usage, the difference in usage, contributes to a difference in energy allowance that we need to allow for in the battery size. It's quite a difficult thing to create, as people aren't really aware of how often they leave the lights in the lounge room on, for example, or really how much TV they watch each evening. It's can be quite a drawn out conversation, but is exceedingly important in an off-grid scenario when you don't have the grid as a backup.
Do you find that some of your customers are extremely surprised at just how much energy they use?
Absolutely, and that's prevalent from our grid connected customers as well. When all they use to gauge how much energy they've used is how much they've been charged, whereas the actual consumption figure is not as widely known, and the amount they're charged depends on that and the charge rate, of course. So you might use a lot but get charged very much for it, which gives you $1 value, or you might use not much and get charged a lot.
Roland, is it as easy as just looking at your bill to be able to figure out how much you're using in terms of your electricity, or do you need to have a much more involved conversation?
All the information is there, both your daily charge, your usage amount, and your usage charge. The power companies don't make it very easy to read. I have some experience in this industry, so I find it reasonably easy to decipher the information, although some bills are easier than others. The way to do it is really just to look at the numbers and do some Googling to find out what those terms mean. But you'd really want to look at every single bill and compare it to the last bill. The power companies don't make it easy because they don't want to make it easy for you to leave them either.
Roland, one of my biggest fears is that I'm going to run out of electricity. So, what are your tips for me to be able to save energy, particularly for off grid houses?
Being aware of your energy usage is vitally important, and being aware of the weather to some degree is as well. If you've had a period of poor weather, and you've had to being frugal with your energy usage, if you know a sunny day is coming up, just wait a day and put on the washing tomorrow instead of today when it's been raining all day.
And do you have any customers that are off grid that you know have run out of electricity that live outside of the city?
A couple of them are still hybrids, so they've got the grid for that 0.1% of the year that they need it. Others have got backup generators for that same contingency.
So, if somebody installs a system, how can they make sure that if they want to go bigger in the future, add more solar panels or get a big battery, what do they need to do today to make sure that they can do that?
With modern technology in solar and batteries, it's actually quite easy to expand on both the size of the solar array and also the size of the batteries. With new lithium batteries, you can just rack in additional batteries provided they're the same make and model. And with solar panels, they're all modular, so you can add additional solar panels and inverters to the system.
The inverters are a crucial component of the system. How do you make sure that you get the right inverter, and how do you allow for, future increases in capacity?
The inverter does all the heavy lifting in a solar system, and it's full of sensitive electronic components. So you want to make sure that you're putting in a premium inverter and not putting in something that may fail prematurely. Generally, if you want to expand on the capacity of your solar system, you'll be putting in additional solar panels and an additional inverter. Inverters run more efficiently if they're paired with a high wattage solar array, so there generally isn't room to add additional panels to a existing inverter.
One of the questions that I get asked most often is what type of battery am I getting? And can you talk a little bit about how the technology changes and how you decide on the types of batteries that you put into your customers' homes?
So for off-grid systems, the battery is one of the more important parts of the system. It needs to provide reliability and redundancy. We used to use managed lithium-ion batteries, which had a communications piece to them, and we found that if there was a problem with the system, it was always that communications link, and if that goes down, the whole system goes down. An incident with one of our customers in the 2019 bushfires changed my design ethos towards that, and we now use an Australian-made lithium-ion battery called Power Plus Energy. While they're lithium-ion, they're not managed, so they don't have that comms piece and therefore provide more redundancy and reliability.
I've decided to include a battery in my system because eventually I want to go off grid. And on my website, you'll see that I've done some calculations to determine what the payback period will be over a number of years with and without a battery. And the payback period with a battery is really, really long. So basically, it's not very economical, but that's not the reason doing this. So, can you talk to us about the benefit or otherwise of having a battery?
So you're doing the noble thing of paying for a battery that's providing you a service. The solar panels will only produce electricity during the day, the daylight hours. So you need an energy source to provide power at night time, and batteries are the only way to do that. The financial calculation there isn't your number one driver. It's the environmental reason. So it's a service that you're happy to pay to provide. People who are putting in batteries are generally only putting them in for backup reasons or environmental reasons like you are.
We get told to shop around for banks. Should we shop around for our energy provider as well?
Absolutely. I've noticed that the longer you stay with the power company, the more they charge you. It seems that almost every quarter or half year they'll jack the prices up on you. I like to call this the loyalty penalty. It seems to be that the only way to get a good rate is to shop around, as hard as they make that. In New South Wales, they introduced the power of choice in 2019, which outlawed any lock-in contracts to make it easier to shop around and get the best rate.
So, kind of every quarter, maybe move to another energy provider.
At least look at your energy rate and see whether it's moved and ask the questions of other providers. There's always healthy competition between them. So you'll always find someone who's offering a better rate than the one you're on. You just got to put in a little of the legwork to get there.
I guess you could also say to your current energy provider, look, I'm looking to shift to this one, match the rate, try and negotiate.
Yeah, absolutely. They do make it hard to get quotes and get rates out of other providers without signing up. But yeah, if you ring up your current provider and say, I'm thinking of leaving, you're charging me too much, you'll be surprised what a discount they'll give you.
I think most people are probably aware of feed-in tariffs, but can you just take us through how they work and whether you should shop around for those as well?
You should absolutely shop around. Feed-in tariffs vary just as much as the actual tariffs they're charging you. The feed-in tariff is for for your excess solar electricity that you've generated in the middle hours of the day over and above what you've self-consumed. This gets exported to the grid and they pay you a small amount of money for this. It is a small amount, but it is very important in the payback of a grid-connected solar system, so you should never discount it. Feed-in tariff prices vary from as low as 5 cents up to as high as sort of 12 to 15 cents.
And is the feed-in tariff quite a large part of the payback that you get from installing a system?
It is, yeah. It'll reduce your payback period from something in the order of 8 years down to as low as 4 or 5 years. That depends on your self-consumption rate mainly, but without the feed-in tariff, the payback period of a grid-connected solar system does increase by a few years.
And is there any way to average what you think the payback period is for most of your customers, or is it really a case-by-case basis?
It's a case-by-case basis. It's dependent on the domestic consumption profile, where you use the majority of your electricity in the afternoon, evening. But you can generally get around about a 50% self-consumption rate. So payback for a solar system can be anywhere as low as 4 years up to 9 or 10 years, depending on the quality of the equipment you're putting in and also your own personal usage habits.
And do you find that you have some customers that are actually making more money than they use in terms of electricity? So they're getting much more coming back to them from the feed-in tariff than they actually consume?
Quite a few of our customers are running credits in summer, which then they roll over to their winter consumption where their production's not as high. You need to have the luxury of a large roof space. None of our customers in the inner west that are doing that because the inner west roofs are so small. We do have some very large systems down in the Southern Highlands in New South Wales where they're pretty much net zero with their energy consumption.
I probably have a very low probability of being able to make a profit from my system.
It also illustrates the importance of having those panels on the street frontage, and I really hope we can get council to agree to them.
Oh, God, me too. Eventually, I want to completely disconnect from the grid, but while I am still connected to the grid, do you think I'm going to be able to make a profit?
So while you're connected to the grid, your excess solar production will be fed back into the grid and you'll receive a feed-in tariff for that. When you want to cut the wires and go completely off grid, you lose that ability for the feed-in tariff to be paid on your excess electricity. The excess solar production is just turned off and it can't go anywhere. The payback period of batteries is a very, very long time. So for you to have any hope of paying your system back, then you'll need to leave the grid connected for a long time, which I don't believe is one of your objectives.
Yeah, definitely. I'm not doing this so that I can make money. It's so I can be self-sufficient for energy and contribute to a bit of a shift in the way that people think about it. So yeah, I'll have to forego that feed-in tariff once I disconnect. So it seems like we are spoiled for choice when it comes to solar panels, inverters and batteries. What do you think about the quality today, and how can us as consumers make sure that we're not getting something dodgy?
The quality of the equipment available in Australia is generally pretty good. There's, of course, better products than others, but there's not really any junk that's on the market at the moment. The quality of the installation, however, is where there's quite a bit of variance. You definitely want to make sure you're getting a high quality installation because they're installing it on your most important asset, which is your house. You definitely don't want any risk for damage or fire or anything like that. So if you can get recommendations of a good solar installation company, you can look at Google reviews. There's a variety of review websites which are available on the internet. But yeah, recommendations is obviously the best one.
Yeah, and I think for me, the fact that you understand the area that I'm trying to put my system up, then, that's really important as well.
Absolutely. And a lot of that can put you at rest just by having a conversation, not just with the salesperson on site, but if you do have access to their installers and you have specific questions to get them answered in a technical way, you can put a lot of your fears at ease that way.
And I think you also mentioned that it's really important that the team that installs is in-house at the business. So is it subcontracting that you should be you worry about? You want the business to be fully integrated?
It's not a vital requirement, but it can suggest that their level of aftercare service is going to be better. I don't want to talk disparagingly about subcontractors. We use them at times when we get busy. So, no, I don't think it's fair to say that subcontractors are going to give you a bad job, because a lot of the industry is built that way. But the lower quality operators rely heavily on cheap subcontractors who won't give you any interest after the job's been done. You're not their customer. You can potentially get into a little bit of a fight between the solar retail company and their subcontractors if something does go wrong in terms of finger pointing around liability. But no, I wouldn't discount a company just because they use subcontractors.
And what about warranties? How important are they?
The warranties are almost as important as the company you've purchased from still being around to help facilitate those warranties. The manufacturer's warranties on the solar panels and the inverters, in the case that a solar retailer goes bankrupt, they'll still be valid, but you'll have to find somebody, a local installer, to help remove the solar panels from the roof and replace them, or the inverter on the wall. The manufacturer will provide a portion of money towards that replacement cost. That generally doesn't cover the cost of the actual testing, fault finding, removal, and then reinstallation at a later date. So if your company's not around anymore, you'll expect to be out of pocket a small amount for that.
I hope you've enjoyed the chat that I've had with Roland Lawrence. If you're interested in sustainability and off-grid living, then please like this video and follow me at the Impossible House.